listening to Planet Vero Radio. I am Cindy Schwartz. We are broadcast on 101.7 FM Real Radio. This is the Patient Partners Show, and Patient Partners is also a podcast on Spreaker and then distributed on its platforms. Jeannie Roll is with me today on live stream. She's from Indiana. We talk about medical things that happen, and we started this because it happened to us, and then we tried to get some alleviation with it, some answers, and we found that we really couldn't. That all we kept hitting were brick walls, and in different states. I'm in Florida, Jeannie's in Indiana, and we have other people that talk on this podcast from other states, so it's nationwide, certainly, and it is also worldwide. It's very disturbing if you have this happen to you, and no, it's not that we're like whiners. Some people are like, oh, well, just get over it. Well, you can't get over this stuff. And when you see it happen to you in a serious medical setting, you specifically want answers because your trust has just been obliterated. So today's topic, I've stumbled upon teamhealth.com blog, and it's from... This particular one is called Amidst the Opioid Epidemic Storm, Reflections of a Non-Opioid Anesthesiologist. So that's one of the things, Jeannie, you and I and your husband and other people ran into problems when we were given these high, powerful drugs, and what they call people are opioid naive, that you've never had these in your body. I mean, who would even think about these things? But this one anesthesiologist, this is what the article is written by David J. Samuels, who's a doctor, and he's a facility medical director of Team Health Anesthesiology and also Select Physician Surgery Center in Tampa, Florida. And he says, and I quote, in 2016, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, MD, sent a letter to every physician in the United States enlisting our commitment to helping end the opioid epidemic. He stated that the crisis was born from a path of good intentions. For decades, physicians were encouraged by various pain organizations, government agencies, and big pharma to be more aggressive about treating pain. Dr. Murthy highlighted routine surgery as a potential gateway for opioid use disorder. Recent literature demonstrated that 6 to 8% of patients remain on opioids for more than 90 days after major or minor surgery. Should anesthesiologists be concerned about our contribution to the initiation of opioid tolerance during surgery? End quote. So I sent this to you, Jeannie, and this was just ding, 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 ding. I was like, these people are getting it, as far as I'm concerned, as far as my experience. I get it that people need pain alleviation. You and I talked about this on another podcast that I contacted an RN, and it was about someone that I know getting fentanyl during childbirth. And I was like, why would you go to that powerful of a drug out of the get-go? And that's kind of been my mindset all along. And it's kind of there, well, not kind of, it is theirs as well, seemingly, and I'll quote a little bit more of this article. And it also has to do with what they're finding out is that people suffer hypoalgesia, which is an increased sensitivity to feeling pain and an extreme response to pain. Hypoalgesia may occur when there is damage to the nerves or chemical changes to the nerve pathways involved in sensing pain. This may be caused by tissue injury or inflammation or by taking certain drugs such as opioids for chronic pain. So what that means is, the pain is more sensitized, your nerves are more sensitized to the pain that really is there. So to make a long story longer, one of the things, the primary symptoms of fibromyalgia, which has to do with, and I'm not a medical doctor, I looked a lot of this stuff up and I started putting the pieces together, has to do with, fibromyalgia does, with hyperalgesia. And one of the side effects of fibromyalgia with all these pain drugs and everything is cognitive difficulties. And we've also talked about that on other podcasts, that doctors in Japan are now looking into these cognitive difficulties and linking some of the stuff possibly to dementia. So, Jeannie Roller, I've said an awful lot. We've got a lot to talk about. What are your thoughts on some of this stuff? What do you think that these doctors are on the right path with this?
Well, they may be on the right path, but some of them are not there on the right reason because they're mostly worried about people becoming addicted to fentanyl, which happens. What I think the article said, in around 6% of all patients who take it longer than what they should. But they're not actually worried about what it does for some patients. For what it, the reason I think fentanyl is overused by the medical community is because it allows them the control, and they are not talking about that. They are not talking about patients not being able to have control over their body while being given fentanyl. They're not. They did talk a little bit that giving fentanyl does make recovery time longer, which does earn the hospital more money. It also makes people nauseous and vomiting, which my husband did. So that also takes longer in recovery. But I think that their main point is they're worried about addiction. And yes, that is a real possibility, addiction, but the bigger problem with using fentanyl to me is that it takes away a person's bodily autonomy, and it also may have long-term cognitive damage that if you have repeated procedures, that will build up and cause greater harm in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Right. I agree with you. Totally on board with that. I want to also interject, though, too. I think maybe you're right about that, Jeannie, with the forefront of this as being addiction. So how is it splitting hairs on how it starts to get people educated about this is what's really happening to your nerves and to your body and that kind of thing? I mean, I don't know. But he does go on to say, and this is another quote, most anesthesiologists today consider fentanyl integral to all anesthetics despite the lack of scientific studies. So that gives credence to what you're saying, that, it's a lot of it's money, a lot of it's power. And also that it was approved in combination form to deter abuse, then subsequently approved alone. They're talking about fentanyl because they did have a difficult time to get it approved to begin with because it can be made any strength that you want it to make because it's made in a laboratory. He goes on to say, too, that let me just say this and then I'll let you take over. He goes on to say, too, in his place in Tampa, that evidence shows collaborative preoperative patient education can lead to improved health outcomes. So I agree with that you need to talk about it. And prior to surgery, in his place, we will educate our patients on expectations concerning pain and its management. And I want to say real quick, and then I'll give it over to you for the last minute and a half or so, is that there are directives now that people that have been opioid addicted sign so that they're never given opioids again in any kind of surgical setting. So I get that is a unique avenue. But it also, we don't know ourselves what we're given for surgery if we're going to be addicted at that time, just as many of those people didn't know. So go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, in my husband's case, he felt the euphoria that you feel when you're high. He didn't know why he was feeling like he did. And afterwards, he felt the dysphoria where you feel dissatisfied, unhappy, anxious. So because he didn't know he was given fentanyl, he suffered all those weird things that go along with it. And that is very unsettling for a person to feel, not knowing what they have been given, and not knowing what they've been given will cause.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but I think that they're talking about that. So this Dr. Samuels is talking about that, and it also started in Belgium as well, and that Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who is the Surgeon General currently right now under Joe Biden, I mean, let's have the conversation. That's what we keep saying every time on this podcast. Read the NOPE, N-O-P-E article. It's no opioid. Do the research. On your own, too, as patients. I mean, I wish I would have known all this stuff. I would have signed a directive for no opioids. Anyway, you've been listening to Planet Fero Radio. Please stay tuned.